There's a debate over the future of Gaza. Right now, several Western leaders are pushing for its future to be run by Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas, an 89-year-old, deeply unpopular leader with a dark history of funding families of terrorists and glorifying suicide bombers.
هذه هي أمريكا، هي الطاعون والطاعون أمريكا.
As Australia's Prime Minister negotiates with Mahmoud Abbas ahead of recognising a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly, questions are being raised over whether Abbas can be trusted to deliver on his promises. This is the true story of Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is the Palestinian Authority president. He's been the leader of the PA for 20 years and hasn't faced a democratic election since 2005. The Palestinian Authority has a chilling history of anti-Semitism. Many of the textbooks used in PA-run schools have featured and praised suicide bombers and have been condemned by international watchdogs for promoting hatred and glorifying violence. Mahmoud Abbas has made countless vile anti-Semitic comments himself, such as comparing Israel to the Nazis, and claims the Holocaust was not about anti-Semitism.
يحارب هؤلاء الناس بسبب وظيفتهم الاجتماعية تتعلق بالربا والأموال وغيرها وغيرها وغيرها. حتى هتلر كان في الحرب العالمية الأولى شويش، كل الناس تعرف، وقال إنه اليهود حارب اليهود لأنهم كانوا يعملون على أساس الربا والمال، يخربون من وجهة نظره هذا، ولذلك هو يكرههم. فنحن نريد أن نوضح هذه النقطة فقط، إنه لا سامية والسامية لا توجد هنا.
Abbas has held a long-standing policy of incentivizing terror against Israelis by rewarding the families of terrorists with lifelong payments for carrying out attacks. The longer the prison sentence handed down to a terrorist, the higher the payment, with some families receiving the equivalent of $5,000 a month. In 2018, Australia's then Foreign Minister Julie Bishop ended direct aid to the Palestinian Authority over concerns funds were going to convicted terrorists and their families. Mahmoud Abbas has pledged to end the so-called pay-for-slay policy, but he's also previously promised that he would never abandon the martyrs.
عن كلمتي لو بقي عنا قرش واحد فهو للأسرى والشهداء. ولن أسمح وتسمحون بتنزيل أي التزام أو أي مصلحة أو أي قرش يقدم لهؤلاء. يجب أن يستلموا كل شيء كما كانوا في الماضي وهم أعز منا جميعا.
Mahmoud Abbas is now promising new elections, governance reform, no more corruption, terminating payments for terrorists, ending the anti-Israel agenda in school, a demilitarised Palestinian state, and renews the right of Israel to exist, which is virtually the opposite of everything the PA has stood for.
The Palestinian Authority has reaffirmed it recognises Israel's right to exist in peace and security. It has committed to demilitarise and to hold general elections. It has pledged to abolish the system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs, and promised broader reform of governance, financial transparency in the education system, including international oversight to guard against the incitement of violence and hatred.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong insists that the world is now seizing the opportunity of major new commitments from the Palestinian Authority.
Is the PA the right body to work with?
There is a lot of reform of the Palestinian Authority which is required. We are clear-eyed about that.
Mahmoud Abbas has been given newfound authority, with Anthony Albanese and other global leaders engaging with him prior to announcing the recognition of a Palestinian state. Yet in reality, the Palestinian Authority controls only part of the West Bank, has no presence at all in Gaza, has little power and even less legitimacy amongst most Palestinians. A recent poll suggests that the majority view the PA as corrupt and are unsure about it taking control.
Abbas also promised that Albanese would stop Hamas from having any role in this new Palestinian state, which Albanese has since been parroting. It won't have a role, even though Palestinian Centre for Policy and Social Research has said that Hamas is actually the most popular party by far in Palestine, and it's Abbas who should go. 81% of Palestinians want him to resign because he's so corrupt. Yet Albanese actually believed Abbas, an 89-year-old who hasn't held elections for 19 years, believed Abbas when Abbas said, oh, look, I'm going to hold them now. I'm going to clean up corruption in the Palestinian Authority. Oh, I'm going to stop paying pensions to relatives of Jew haters. All these are promises Abbas has broken before. But Albanese actually believed him.
Australia follows France, the UK and Canada in recognising a Palestinian state, a move that is being celebrated by terror group Hamas, the group that carried out the devastating October 7 attacks, killing 1,200 people and taking 250 hostage, and still refuses to release the 50 hostages it holds and tortures in its terror tunnels.
The Prime Minister has said he's not a cheerleader for Hamas. The problem is that Hamas is a cheerleader for him. And when you have terrorists cheering on your foreign policy, you know that you've got it wrong.
Just days before Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong's announcement, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned that recognising Palestinian statehood encourages Hamas to abandon ceasefire talks.
Well, if you notice, the talks with Hamas fell apart on the day Macron made the unilateral decision that he's going to recognize a Palestinian state. And then you have other people come forward, other countries say, well, if there's not a ceasefire by September, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Well, if I'm Hamas, I basically conclude, let's not do a ceasefire. Right. Because we can be rewarded and we can claim it as a victory. So those messages, while largely symbolic in their minds, actually have made it harder to get peace and harder to achieve a deal with Hamas. They feel emboldened.
Anthony Albanese says Hamas can have no role in a Palestinian state, yet cannot explain how Hamas would be disarmed or would be prevented from running Gaza.
Prime Minister, your conditions for a Palestinian state would require that Hamas lays down its weapons. How do you propose that is actually going to happen? How does anyone demilitarise Hamas?
The important thing is what the Arab League have said. The Arab League, the countries around the region, as well as the international community, have made it very clear. Hamas has no role. No role.
But how do you actually demilitarise Hamas?
The Arab League have made it very clear that Hamas must lay down its weapons. The international community have made it very clear that Hamas will have no role in a future Palestinian state.
Anthony Albanese was influenced in his decision following a phone call with Abbas where the PA leader essentially disavowed a lifetime of beliefs. But it appears that Anthony Albanese seemed to have forgotten to ask for an undertaking that the PA would drop its demand for Palestinians and their descendants to be able to return to live in Israel if they desired. The so-called right of return has been the centrepiece of Palestinian opposition to any peace deal with Israel since 1949. It is gobsmacking that Anthony Albanese would not make it a specific, vital and non-negotiable component of any agreement with Abbas. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has slammed Australia's announcement as shameful. He insists that his plan to seize Gaza City is the quickest way to end the war.
To have the European countries and Australia march into that rabbit hole, it's actually shameful.
The White House is disgusted with Albanese's decision.
Disappointing and frustrating. Frustrating that there was no communication with the United States. As Israel's closest partner, we would have expected that there would have been some heads up. There wasn't. This was done unilaterally.
There are questions over the direction of Australia's foreign policy, as Anthony Albanese has been in talks with Mahmoud Abbas before he's been able to secure a face-to-face meeting with the President of the United States. Albanese has also come under fire for adopting the language of terrorists by using the term martyrs during his press conference.
It has pledged to abolish the system of payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs.
He called them martyrs. Our own Prime Minister called Palestinian terrorists, suicide bombers and the like, martyrs. If that doesn't show you how low we have sunk, I don't know what could.
The decision to recognise a Palestinian state has also been labelled a major slap in the face to Jewish Australians who have faced a horrific rise of anti-Semitic attacks since October 7, 2023.
I never could have imagined that the devastating massacre of 1,200 innocent children and families on October 7 would less than 2 years later reward those who perpetrated it with symbolic statehood.
Well, clearly, this is a reward for terrorism. I mean, this is a reward for Hamas. This is incentive for them to keep refusing the ceasefire offers, which Israel and most decent people want. It's clear, as Secretary Rubio pointed out the other day, when the French started talking about recognition of a Palestinian state, Hamas walked away from promising ceasefire talks only a few weeks ago, and that's the pattern that's going to continue. So our community, of course, is desperately upset that an imminent ceasefire to save the poor hostages that are still alive and frankly relieve the suffering of the Gazans, which is inflicted on them by Hamas, that's going to continue. Of course, you know, in a sense, Israel has been betrayed here by what the Australian government's done. Australia's national interest has been betrayed. And of course, what it risks is just fanning the flames of hostility, racism, and let's be frank, anti-Semitism, which we've seen explode over the last couple of years. So disappointment, but on the other hand, determination to plead our case in the interest of our community as Australians, in the interest of Australia. And we're not going away. We're resilient, and we'll stand up with our friends and the broader community to point out how wrong-headed and counterproductive this move by the government is. I mean, for the Prime Minister to actually just throw out of the window the sensible preconditions that he actually announced just over 10 days or so ago. I mean, that's incomprehensible that he would do that and trust on the commitments that after a state is set up from Mr. Abbas and whoever else is in charge, that, oh yes, they will implement those preconditions that he's given to reform the Palestinian Authority, to accept Israel in peace in bilateral negotiations alongside Israel in future peace, that'll give up on incitement to hatred and all the rest. I mean, that really reflects undergraduate thinking and is very dangerous for us as Australia, but also is not good advice in terms of what's unfolding in the Middle East, Chris.
Well, Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong may be genuine in their desire for peace in the Middle East, hoping that this corrupt and anti-Semitic leader, Mahmoud Abbas, who has a history of glorifying terrorists, can deliver on his new promises, is being labelled a fantasy.
Of course this is not a novel idea, the two-state solution, Gemma. We know that's what everybody's talked about, but it's been rejected so many times by the Palestinians, and we've never been further away from it now. This is the absurdity of putting it up now before you have peace. It just does my head in.
Well, it proves so many things. It proves that we have a government that can't be taken seriously. We have a government and a leader, or I'm not going to call him a leader, an elected Prime Minister in Anthony Albanese, who lies. He said there would be no acknowledgement of statehood while Hamas was still involved and in power, while hostages were still being held, while terrorists are being rewarded by the Palestinian Authority under their public pay-for-slay policy. The more you feel free, if you don't know this policy, to go and look it up yourself. The more Jews you kill, the more money, more pension your family is paid. That is not a construct, that is an actual fact. It's called pay for slay. Our government skims over the material.
Albanese today accepted an assurance that that would be ended, and he called them martyrs in his own press conference.
He's an embarrassment to this nation, and it is a dark day because you become the company you keep. And this Prime Minister and Senator Wong and the entire Labor cohort have decided to pitch Australia's moral and ethical tent next to a people group, or not a people group, a government. Well, you can't even call it a government. Whatever it is over there, it's a hot mess. If you're a woman in the forget about gays and minorities. We know what happens. You know, is the Labor gays for Palestine going to go over to Khan Yunis and spread the good news themselves? But if you're a woman in the disputed territories, Chris, your vote is worth half of a man. Your legal testimony is worth half of a man. Intra-family sexual violence is legal. If you want a divorce, you can't get one. You have to pay for it, and that's if you're lucky enough. Let's not start talking about honour killings. These are it's not policy. People need to understand this is not policy, this is identity. And when you're talking about a two-state solution, this is something the West has dreamed up to try and appease a people group who could have had their own state, but it is not policy, it is identity. One of the hostages I spoke to, returned hostages, in December, said to me that the civilian family who held her, amongst other things, when I wrote about this in The Australian at the time, said, I don't know why you Jews think that you have the right to exist. Now, that's obviously not every person in that region, but look at what's happening over there. Look at it. It is, this government has not graduated from university. They are prepared to sacrifice Australia's moral and ethical guidelines and the core of our heart, which is freedom and democracy. Would any single person in the current Labor government go and live under the Palestinian Authority? And they want to legitimise, or whatever it is, it's not a government because there is no law. They want to legitimise this. And for what? For the world's most embarrassing game of status anxiety. They just want to be in the cool kids.